As Michael Myers spies on his sister and her boyfriend at the beginning of the movie, you'll notice that the clown mask actually belongs to the boyfriend, or at least he found it there and decided to incorporate it. He brings it up with him when the two decide to go upstairs. This small detail may be the key to understanding the entire film. The opening scene is shown through the perspective of the 6-year-old voyeur, Michael Myers. He's at an age where kids are very impressionable. What a child sees at this age can shape who they become. Children his age also normally aren't capable of understanding topics of a mature nature. He sees the boyfriend put on this mask and kiss Judy with it, then goes upstairs to do something in the dark. It is perhaps not the first time Michael has seen something like this without their knowledge of it, but he wasn't supposed to see this, and he doesn't know any better than to imitate it. He grabs a phallic object and takes it upstairs. He comes across the mask and puts it on himself, just copying what he had seen through the window. When he enters the room, he looks at Judy, then looks at the recently used bed, then back at Judy. This little camera movement suggests that he probably has seen the deed done before. He uses the object against Judy, then, as he had seen the boyfriend do, immediately leaves, goes down the stairs, and goes outside. For the first time, we see Michael, and he's wearing the red, yellow, green, and blue clown costume, which matches the red, yellow, green, and blue shirt that Judy's boyfriend had been wearing. The trauma of that night's events had all spawned from a bad imitation of an act that the child was never supposed to see, and this experience would shape everything that would happen when Michael returned 15 years later. To learn the meaning behind this and other iconic scenes, stick around to the end of this video. Black cats and goblins and broomsticks and ghosts, covens of witches with all of their hosts. You may think they scare me, you're probably right. Black cats and goblins on Halloween night. Welcome to Things You Missed. Yes, I'm finally doing Halloween. I'll also be joined by YouTube's resident Halloween expert, Jimmy Champagne.
What we now know as one of horror's biggest franchises started as a small independent film directed by John Carpenter. There's not much I can say in this section that hasn't already been covered on plenty of other channels, but I think you might be surprised at some of the things you missed. So let's jump back into them now.
One of the best parts about Halloween is that iconic soundtrack, which kicks off at the very beginning of the film, where we see the opening titles next to a jack-o'-lantern. You'll notice the cutouts of the nose and mouth are connected by this slice. I've seen it suggested that this makes it look like somebody holding a knife. I can kind of see that, but I'm really more interested in the camera movement, which pushes forward all the way into the jack-o'-lantern's left eye. I see this as a foreshadowing of the climax of the movie, where Laurie used a coat hanger to poke out Michael's left eye so she can escape the closet. I mentioned how Michael's youth may have impacted his development when it comes to mature topics. As the admirable Spencer Charnas puts it, stabbing in the dark. Think about it, there's more than one meaning there. But both meanings are intertwined by the matchbox that Michael finds after breaking out of the sanitarium and into the station wagon that he hijacks. It says, "The Rabbit in Red Lounge." Rabbits are often used as an adult symbol, while red, well, you've seen a horror movie before, you know what red stands for.
Blood. It stands for blood.
Yes, thank you for your insight, Jimmy Champagne. The horror genre has no shortage of fictional towns that fans would probably love to visit. Maybe you'd like a creamy bowl of clam chowder in Derry, Maine, or soak up some sun in Amity Island. One of the most famous examples is Halloween's own Haddonfield, Illinois. Having lived in Illinois as a kid, go Cubs go, I was curious about where Haddonfield is located.
I always like this location a lot because it's pretty close to the place where I grew up in Southeast Michigan.
When attempting to pick up Michael, the nurse asks why they're taking him up to Hardin County. Haddonfield may not be a real place, but Hardin County is, which means the story must take place way down at the bottom tip of the state. However, both direct sequels show police paraphernalia from Warren County, which is all the way to the west, while Halloween 4 places the town in Livingston County, closer to the northeast by Chicago. I think the idea is that Haddonfield is just supposed to be a stand-in for any small town in America, a kind of every town USA ordeal.
Of course, I don't think there's anywhere in Illinois that has outdoor schools or palm trees, so it's probably best not to focus on the location too much. In fact, the name Haddonfield actually comes from the writer-producer of the movie Deborah Hill's hometown, which was Haddonfield, New Jersey. And on top of that, the name Michael Myers comes from the European distributor who put out Carpenter's previous film, Assault on Precinct 13, and made sure it was an international success. Because you know, naming an immortal serial killer after someone is the most sincere form of flattery. And on a completely unrelated side note, I fully expect your first slasher villain to be named after me.
I guess nobody told that to the character of Michael Myers though, because as I mentioned earlier, he still thinks that imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. Just as he did 15 years ago, he finds himself a costume before going on his next rampage. Once again, he chooses a one-piece jumpsuit and a mask, but this time the jumpsuit is a mechanic's attire instead of the clown suit, and the mask is a heavily modified Shatner mask stolen from the hardware store.
Although, or maybe because William Shatner would have been instantly recognizable back in 1978, they made a ton of alterations to the mask, like painting the skin stark white, dyeing the hair brown, and widening the eye holes. It basically removed every identifiable feature from the mask, which if you think about it is perfect for a character named The Shape, who's literally the absence of all character.
Given the psychosexual subtext that I've highlighted for this character, it's probably no coincidence that he chooses to imitate a male heartthrob from a popular TV series, one who happens to have given one of the most noteworthy on-screen kisses in television history. The psychosexual metaphors do not end there though. This theme touches many aspects of the film, like in this scene where Laurie Strode is walking to school while singing a little song to herself.
I wish I had you all alone, just the two of us.
Notice how when Michael steps into frame, we can hear his heavy breathing against the mask as he stares her all the way down the sidewalk. Of course, at the end of the movie, we would later find that her idea of being all alone with a man is far different than his idea of being all alone with her, or any of the other babysitters he would encounter in the neighborhood. But before we get there is an interesting scene in Laurie's English class that we can analyze to learn more about Michael Myers' true nature.
No matter what course of action Collins took, he was destined to his own fate, his own day of reckoning.
As Laurie sits in the back of her English class, her teacher gives a lecture about fate, and she asks the class to compare two authors' different portrayals of it. Laurie answers that one author, Costain, saw fate as being related to religion, while the other, Samuel, saw it as a natural element. The teacher then expands upon Laurie's answer.
That's right, Samuel's definitely personified fate. In Samuel's writing, fate is immovable, like a mountain. It stands where man passes away. Fate never changes.
After watching the movie a few times, this interpretation starts to sound familiar. It's almost as if the English teacher is talking about Michael Myers, who Laurie briefly spots out the window during this scene. Michael is the personification of fate. Michael is literally this immovable force that will end the lives of nearly anyone that he sets his sights on. Throughout the movie, Dr. Loomis raves about how Michael has nothing but evil behind his empty eyes. He is the only one who fully understands the threat that Michael represents. If Michael is the personification of fate, then Loomis is essentially the author Samuel's, warning everyone that fate is coming for them.
Perhaps another clue to this metaphor comes from the name of the character Dr. Samuel Loomis, who, side note, is my favorite character in the Halloween franchise. The names of these two authors seem fictional, or at the very least, they're not obvious to us as the audience when the teacher mentions the names Samuels and Costain. Because of that, it's extremely likely that Samuels and Sam Loomis having very similar names was an intentional clue. There's another potentially noteworthy point about Sam Loomis that I think is worth mentioning. If you look at Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 classic Psycho, there's a character named Sam Loomis. Normally, I don't think this would be worth bringing up in a video, but there are a few other connections to Psycho in Halloween. So in Psycho, the character Sam Loomis sleeps with the character Marion Crane, and in Halloween, there's a character named Sam Loomis who hangs out with the character named Marion. Her name is Marion Chambers, but it's still Marion. And then you gotta think about the fact that Marion Crane is played by Janet Leigh in Psycho, and Janet Leigh is Jamie Lee Curtis's mom. Jamie Lee Curtis plays the main character in Halloween, Laurie Strode. And finally, the lighting in Halloween is clearly inspired by the lighting in Psycho. There are many scenes in Halloween where you see characters striped in shadow, like the light is coming through blinds or other horizontal objects.
Then there's a broader connection with the film's antagonists. Spoiler alert for Psycho until the end of this chapter. Michael Myers and Norman Bates are both disturbed by mental conditions acquired in their youth. They both seem to be affected by an Oedipus complex, or at least some variation of it. Norman develops this complex for his mother, while Michael vents his developmental issues into his sister, Judith. Although Judith was his first target, all we really know is that she's a teenager, and it seems to be her activity with her boyfriend that sets Michael off. When he returns to Haddonfield on Halloween in 1978, his attack pattern continues. He claims 4 human victims in this movie, and comes after a 5th, which is Laurie, but she's able to evade him. The first was the mechanic, which was off screen. We can't really analyze that one. The other 3 are sexually active teenagers, just like Judith was. In fact, these girls hardly seem to think about anything besides hooking up. At one point, when Laurie mentions that she forgot her chemistry book, Linda raves about how she never brings her books home because she doesn't need them. She's a liar though. She does have 2 books with her. One Love Forever and Tender Love something. We don't really get a good look at this one. The girls' priorities are clear. Laurie prioritizes her future by wanting to study and get good grades. Linda is more interested in love and getting busy. You could say that they represent the liberation movement that was going on from the 1960s to the 1980s, where traditional codes of conduct were being challenged. Laurie represents the traditional point of view. She's always covered up and very modest about herself. Her friends are Well, the opposite of that. They look for any excuse to be a little bit more promiscuous. Have you ever seen someone completely strip down and throw their entire outfit in the wash after a small spill? When Annie is in her underwear, Laurie is actually adding on layers. She puts on an apron while gutting a pumpkin with the kids. Annie has a cigarette in the car. She easily inhales it, but Laurie chokes on the smoke, showing us that she's not used to breathing in poison. She is innocent and pure. These girls are wired with teenage hormones. The difference is that Linda and Annie are acting on their urges while Laurie keeps them internalized.
God, I've got a shirt on. That's all you ever think about.
I think that's all you ever think about.
That's not true. I think about lots of things. Now, why don't we not stand here talking about them and get down to doing them?
Annie even teases Laurie for not being totally consumed with dating like she is.
Laurie, dear. He wants to talk to you. He wants to take you out tonight.
We come to find out that Laurie actually does have a crush. She just doesn't see herself as part of this whole liberation movement. When Annie tells her she could ask someone to the dance, she literally says,
You could do that, I couldn't.
I even found myself wondering if the book that Laurie forgets, her chemistry book, is an intentional comment about her character. Her two friends have boyfriends, but Laurie is single. She hasn't developed that chemistry with a man yet.
Writer-director John Carpenter and writer-producer Deborah Hill have given many interviews over the years where they clarified that it was never their intent to have the main character's survival be mainly because she stays a virgin throughout the entire film. With that being said though, they've also attributed Laurie's survival to her alertness, whereas her friends are distracted with horny endeavors. I guess they're saying that because it adds a little bit of nuance to their writing, and they are totally within their right to do so, but to me, it's all the same. It's kind of obvious that Michael is trying to recreate his sister's final night with other less driven teens, and it's Laurie's lack of beguilement that helps her survive till the end. And just for some quick trivia, Jamie Lee Curtis has talked about in interviews that she was actually kind of surprised that she was cast as the Goody Two-Shoes character, Laurie Strode, because in real life, she was actually more like Annie and Linda.
This makes sense if we analyze Michael's behavior. When school first lets out, one of the elementary kids, Richie, runs into Michael. There's an ample opportunity to take him out, but he just lets him run along. There are two moments when Michael seems to eye Tommy Doyle as he walks home from school, but ultimately just moves on. He's not James Charles. He doesn't seem interested in little boys. Although Tommy and Lindsay are afraid of the boogeyman, there's never a moment where he actually pursues them. It was always about sticking his knife into Haddonfield High School's most promiscuous teens. I mean, look how he's holding the knife right there. I mean, come on.
It's never really been confirmed one way or the other, which I kind of like, but the leading theory as to why Michael is trying to go after teenagers to be his victims is because they remind him of his sister and her boyfriend. Oh, and he also thinks they're all unpure, which is why he can go after Laurie Strode, who's a virgin.
Loomis and Sheriff Brackett are worried about the safety of the town's trick-or-treaters, but this never turns out to be a problem. Even though this kid doesn't have a costume. I mean, what the hell, kid? It's Halloween. You gotta get yourself a costume. Michael's Freudian issues aren't just about who he's going after. It's also how he's going about it. But before we get there are some important secrets to decipher in Laurie's room. When the girls get out of school, you can hear the cheerleaders practicing in the background. We're from Haddonfield, couldn't be prouder. Can't hear us now, we'll yell a little louder. I see this cheer as a foreshadowing of that evening's events, where there would be quite a lot of yelling from Haddonfield's student body. The second line, can't hear us now, we'll yell a little louder, also fits in nicely with the screams that finally get Dr. Loomis's attention. The ground is dry, and the ground is wet. Laurie goes home, where we see for the only time the inside of her room. Those of you who are familiar with my videos will probably expect me to point out this Raggedy Ann doll on her dresser. While it is true that this is the same kind of doll as the supposedly haunted doll that inspired the Annabelle movies, and while it is also true that Ed and Lorraine Warren investigated the doll in 1970, a safe 8 years before Halloween came out, I'm not entirely sure if John Carpenter put it in the movie just to be creepy, or if it was just a popular doll at the time. All I can really say with certainty is that this doll, seen later at the Wallace's house, is way creepier. Laurie has a large poster of a painting by James Ensor, a Belgian expressionist painter from the 1800s, who is most famous for portraying human figures wearing grotesque masks. That may not seem like much of a connection today when masked horror movie killers are plentiful, but you have to remember when Halloween came out, Michael Myers wearing a mask was kind of a novel concept. This was the movie that started the trend. Laurie looks out the window and sees Michael standing behind some bed sheets on a clothesline. There seems to be a running theme of Michael appearing behind sheets and bed sheets, which again all ties into the psychosexual themes that I pointed out throughout this video. When Annie sees Michael in the laundry room, it's through a sheet. And when he appears to Linda in the bedroom, he's wearing a bedsheet ghost costume. So we have all of these associations tying Michael's appearances to the idea of going to bed with someone. And since I failed to bring this up in my It's 1990 episode, I have to mention this here. The production designer and editor of Halloween was Tommy Lee Wallace. He went on to direct Halloween 3, but he also went on to direct It, where he once again used a line of bedsheets blowing in the wind for a scare. Also, it looks like the guy has like at least 3 characters named after him: Tommy Doyle, Lee Brackett, and Lindsay Wallace.
That afternoon, Loomis heads over to Judith Meyer's gravesite, correctly assuming that Michael will try to go there at some point, but unfortunately for him, the gravekeeper talks his ear off.
Yeah, you know, every town there's something like this happens. I remember over in Russellville, old Charlie Bowles, about 15 years ago.
He tells the story of a guy who went into his garage one night and grabbed a hacksaw and then came inside and presumably turned his family into mincemeat. Back in 2014, John Carpenter did an interview with Halloween Daily News where he described why he put this weirdly specific story in the movie. Apparently, Russellville was a city in Kentucky near where John went to college. And old Charlie Bowles was named after the father of his girlfriend, who was in the Kentucky Mafia, which I literally just found out existed, and apparently that guy had her husband whacked. In-laws, am I right? Anyway, they find Judith's grave already uprooted when they get there.
They'd do anything for Halloween.
Guilty as charged.
Loomis's next stop is the old Myers house, which has gained a reputation for being supposedly haunted. Now, this next one isn't a traditional thing you missed, but it's more something that nobody talks enough about. Loomis and Sheriff Brackett discover the remains of a dog and realize the body is fresh. And this is Dr. Loomis's response?
He got hungry.
So Michael got hungry and pulled a rice gum? This is the most messed up thing in the movie and nobody ever talks about it, so I just had to bring it up and ask, why? Also, when they go upstairs, the wallpaper is different than it was in 1963. We know that nobody lived there after the Myers, so that means that Mr. and Mrs. Myers actually tried to change the wallpaper and continue living there alone after Judith was killed and Michael was sent to the sanitarium. My personal headcanon says they thought they could get past the trauma of what happened there if they changed the look of the room, but ultimately it was too sad and they ended up abandoning the house anyway.
That evening, Lori and Annie get settled in as the two are babysitting at houses right across the street from each other. In what I can only imagine is the 1978 version of iPad parenting, Lori puts a movie on the TV called The Thing from Another World, which came out back in 1951. It's a real movie and it was one of John Carpenter's biggest inspirations, and it was kind of a preview of things to come for him because in 1982 he would release his own remake of it, which was just shortened to The Thing.
Yeah, I think that one sounds vaguely familiar.
And just like with Halloween, Big Trouble in Little China, The Fog, and pretty much every other John Carpenter movie, when it came out, it was a critical and commercial bomb, but then as the decades went on, it became revered as a classic. Can you see why all John Carpenter really seems to want to do these days is sit inside and play Fallout?
Why the glum face? I thought random murder was routine around here.
As Lori and Annie talk on the phone about the possibility of attending the homecoming dance with her crush Ben Tramer, Michael appears outside the house for the first time. At the beginning of the movie, we saw Michael spying on a teenage relationship from his point of view, but now we're seeing the other side, as Tommy notices the shape standing in the dark outside of the Wallace's house.
Michael's many background appearances are one of the things that makes this movie so fun to revisit year after year. Every time they release it on a new medium like DVD, Blu-ray, or 4K Blu-ray, someone manages to find him in a different spot, and I love that.
Yeah, Jimmy, I can't wait until you see this movie after you upgrade from seeing it on Laserdisc. Just as bedsheets have served as a link between Michael and the things we do in the dark, well, darkness is also a reminder of that thing we do in the dark. Now you're probably reaching for that button to click off this video because almost all horror movies take place in the dark, right? Well, hold on just a minute. It's not just the darkness here, although lighting-wise, this movie is really dark. There are scenes where the screen is almost entirely black. You could say this is just a result of this being a low-budget horror movie shot on film, but it's not just a couple of scenes. There are a lot of scenes with barely any lights. 2, the darkness is acknowledged in the dialogue by Linda.
Yeah, it's totally dark.
Yeah.
And 3, what happens in the dark is also relevant here. For example, the screams in this movie. They aren't your typical blood-curdling horror movie screams. They almost sound more like something else. When Lori hears Annie trying to scream over the phone, she even kind of acknowledges that it sounds like there are some extracurricular activities going on.
All right, Annie. First I get your famous chewing, now I get your famous squealing.
That's not even all of them. Next time you watch the movie, that's something you can look out for. But it's not just the screams. I'm also gonna look at how some of these kills are executed, and I'll be analyzing what the ending of John Carpenter's Halloween really represents. Keeping on topic with my main thesis about Michael's rampage being a release of distorted psychosexual tension, let's look at the death scenes of each of Laurie's friends and see how they tie into this idea. The first to go is the sheriff's daughter, Annie Brackett. Michael ambushes her when she hops into the car to go pick up her boyfriend, but she realizes something is wrong when she notices that the windows are fogged up, a sign that somebody had been breathing inside of the enclosed airspace for some time. Anyone who had a high school or college girlfriend is probably familiar with the concept of the fogged up car window. Since teens usually don't have a good place to get intimate, they often end up driving a car to a secluded location for some privacy. So it's probably an intentional choice for Michael to replicate that. And the fact that she was on her way to pick up her boyfriend certainly fits with the pattern of Michael's attacks.
Someone smart like Laurie probably would have realized that somebody is in the car.
The next victims would be Linda and her boyfriend Bob. It really bothers me how Bob just leaves the car door open when they first pull up to the house.
Yeah, why does he do that?
The way he stalks them is very reminiscent of Michael's childhood Halloween in 1963. He watches them make out on the couch, and he continues to spy on them after they move things upstairs. Notice his shadow passing by right here. In a break from their activities, Bob goes to the kitchen to get a couple of drinks, and Michael uses a knife to literally pin him up to the wall, which symbolizes another teenage cliche, pin-up models. If you're somehow unfamiliar, a pin-up is just a poster of an attractive model or celebrity that teens like to pin up onto their bedroom wall so they can fantasize about them as they go to sleep. The last kill of the movie is Linda. When Michael approaches her, he's wearing a costume, which leads her to believe that this is her boyfriend, Bob. This one represents roleplay.
What's the matter? Can I get your ghost, Bob?
Maybe it's because I was born in the 90s, but I still don't get why that's funny. I think there's also something to be said about how easy it is for Michael to trap and kill these three, who are established to be the most likely to be distracted by the allure of hooking up, as opposed to Laurie, who is much more level-headed. At times, it feels like Michael Myers almost doesn't want to kill her. It seems like he intentionally misses her right here and cuts her shirt instead. Then again later, she's not moving, yet he sticks the knife into the couch instead. In the context of the message of the movie, it's like he's giving her a warning. He knows she has dirty thoughts, as established in the car early that afternoon, but her mind isn't consumed by dating and boys like the others, so taking her out doesn't really fit in with Michael's agenda. The chase continues on to the Doyle's upstairs bedroom. Laurie thinks that she's gotten the better of Michael, but in the background, he can be seen rising up once more in a manner very similar to Nosferatu, from the 1922 classic German horror movie. Some might say there's a phallic parallel going on here. Loomis shows up and buries some lead into his former patient, knocking him off the balcony, but when he goes to collect his spoils, the mysterious villain has disappeared. The movie ends as the iconic score shows us various locations all around the house, accompanied by the slow, unnerving breathing of the evil antagonist. The final shot takes us back once more to the Myers house, as if to suggest that this entire series of events was just another mental episode, just like the one that young Michael Myers went on all of those years ago.
I think the reason Halloween has endured so long is because at its heart, it's a simple story about a local boogeyman coming back to haunt a town on Halloween night that could be any town in America. The decision to have him escape into the night at the end of the movie was so smart, because if he's alive, that means he's out there and he could come to your town on Halloween night and you could have a run-in with him. That's what kept me up at night when I was a kid, and some of the revelations in Halloween 2 also kept me up at night, but for completely different reasons.
Halloween 2 would literally pick up right where the original left off, but that would not prevent it from subjecting the story to some major changes, like some lore and motivation for the mysterious masked antagonist. Police find the word Samhain, or as Loomis says it, Samhain, written on a chalkboard at the elementary school. The significance is only briefly explained by Michael's psychiatrist, Dr. Loomis. He mentions that it's a Celtic word, meaning Lord of the Dead, that the festival of Samhain signified the end of summer. But the meaning and connection to Michael Myers and the overall message of Halloween 2 goes much deeper than that. It actually refers to a Gaelic festival, marking the end of the harvest season and the beginning of the darker half of the year. In the Northern Hemisphere, it is observed starting on the evening of October 31st and ending on the evening of November 1st, much like Michael's rampage in this movie. It begins on Halloween night and carries over into the first day of November. Early literature says that Samhain was celebrated with the opening of ancient burial mounds, which were seen as portals to the other world, which may have been opened with bonfires and sacrifices. Maybe Myers' defeat at the end of the movie is symbolic for its connection to these Samhain festivals. It is believed that over time, Samhain merged with other cultural celebrations, eventually becoming Halloween as we know it today. So it may come as no surprise that this word may be the key to understanding everything else in the undertones of the original Halloween sequel. 6 gunshots would not be enough to keep Michael Myers down down. Last time, I broke down the psychosexual subtext of the 1978 original. So in this episode, I'll introspect the 1981 follow-up, Halloween 2, the first of many attempts to create a direct sequel.
Writer-director John Carpenter initially wasn't interested in continuing the story of Michael Myers, but then he said, screw it, I do like money, so he returned to produce and write the screenplay. Oh, and he also decided to collaborate on the score. So directing duties would initially fall on Rick Rosenthal, but Carpenter didn't like what he came up with, so he reshot some scenes, and then he still didn't like the finished product.
The opening of this film takes us back to that fateful Halloween night in 1978, and we fade in backed by the song Mr. Sandman by the Chordettes. We hear the lyrics, "Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream." This is the first of many references in this movie to the idea of dreams and the unconscious mind. Mr. Sandman is a myth from European folklore and serves as a stand-in for another mythological man, the Boogeyman, an alias that is commonly used to refer to Michael Myers in the first movie.
What's the Boogeyman?
As a matter of fact, it was.
The lyric specifically says, "Mr. Sandman, bring me a dream." Throughout the movie, Laurie is terrified of going to sleep, perhaps because some part of her subconscious mind knows that her dreams are where she'll see her brother and nemesis, Michael Myers. We do see a glimpse of one of those dreams when she dozes off at one point at the hospital, though it's unclear if she made the connection about who this mysterious boy actually is. But one way or another, she seems terrified of the idea of seeing the backs of her eyelids ever since her encounter with him. It's the first thing she tells the ambulance EMT, and she reiterates it for the doctor.
No, don't put me to sleep.
And there's even a deleted scene where she uses sheer willpower to keep herself awake.
She awake?
Dr. Mixter gave her a double bullet. She can keep her eyes open. She's made out of steel.
She actually falls asleep, eyes open, when the medication fully kicks in, a testament to just how much she wanted to avoid seeing that dream at all costs. The beginning of the movie takes us back to the final 5 minutes of the original, with a couple of shots giving us a new perspective on those events.
In a way, this was a taste of things to come. Rick Rosenthal would go to extreme lengths to shoot this movie in the same style as John Carpenter's Halloween, and what better warm-up exercise is there than adding shots to an already existing scene? This is followed by a long POV shot of Michael Myers spying on the neighborhood, which is of course a direct callback to the intro shot of the original Halloween, where we see the world through young Michael Myers' eyes. Both scenes feature him looking through windows, sneaking inside, and then stealing a knife, all while no one seems to notice that he's there. Both scenes are also important from a filmmaking standpoint because one takes are notoriously expensive and challenging to get right. So a little movie like Halloween 2 nailing it as hard as it does really helped it to stand out from the growing pool of competitors, and that pool was growing extremely quickly.
Michael looks in on Mr. and Mrs. Elrod's house.
No, not that Mrs. Elrod.
Mr. Elrod is watching Dr. Dementia's horror movie marathon, a continuation of what Lindsay Wallace and Tommy Doyle were seen watching in the first one. We continually see this on TVs throughout the night, whether it's George Romero's Night of the Living Dead or the 1955 horror film Dementia, a movie involving a woman caught in a nightmare cycle that deals with the horror of the subconscious, kind of like how Laurie feels that she's trapped in an inescapable nightmare with Michael, which affects her so badly she's mortified at the idea of going to sleep.
Now, back to Dementia.
When I covered the original movie, one symbol that I pointed out time and time again was the use of bed sheets. We were always seeing Michael through these sheets, and I interpreted that as part of this metaphor for his tendency to go after these teens that were trying to go to bed with one another. There is one hookup couple that Michael takes out in Halloween 2, which may be the most brutal scene in the whole franchise, but the main theme of this film, if I had to pick just one thing, is the idea that Michael is this never-ending bad dream. In that sense, the bedsheet motif still works, now being given a different meaning. It's associated with the dream where Laurie discovers that she's related to Michael, an idea that festers in her subconscious, but her conscious mind doesn't want to face.
One constant in nearly all of John Carpenter's projects from the time is the use of the actress Nancy Loomis. She's the woman who played Annie in the original Halloween, but her death in that movie doesn't stop her from appearing a few times in the sequel. I'd say chances are pretty slim you didn't miss when Annie's body was brought out of the house and identified by her father, but you probably didn't notice that she plays Sally, the girl on the other end of the phone telling her friend about what's going on in Haddonfield.
Didn't you hear?
Hear about what?
Some girl got killed in Haddonfield. It's on the radio.
While there are still plenty of Halloween 1 callbacks to discuss, there's also a potential look at the future of the franchise in the form of one seemingly random side character. Shortly before Laurie's ambulance arrives at the hospital, we see a mother taking her swashbuckling son into the emergency room. He's bleeding profusely from the mouth, and when he drops his towel, we see why. A huge razor blade is jammed into his gum. costumes. This calls back to an urban legend about tempered Halloween candy. I remember when I was a kid, my parents would always have to inspect my trick-or-treating haul to look out for any wrappers that might have been altered, in fear of a malicious neighbor possibly poisoning or putting foreign objects into the candy. That's the implication here. Michael Myers is not the only evil in Haddonfield. Longtime Halloween fans know that Michael wasn't intended to be a recurring character. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill planned to make it an anthology series about various scary stories all taking place on Halloween night. That's why Halloween 3 has almost no relation to the first two movies. This pirate costume kid almost seems to foreshadow Halloween 3, which, spoiler alert, features an evil company's plot to harm trick-or-treaters. With so much of this movie trying to match what happened in the past, this one character looks towards Halloween's future. Soon after, we're introduced to Karen, who is on her way out of a Halloween party. In true Karen fashion, she has a little bit of a public freakout. Roll it.
I'm never going to another Halloween party as long as I live, especially not at Stevie Mathis' house.
This is our first crew reference Easter egg, because Steve Mathis is the electrician on this movie's credits. The only other one that I can say definitely exists is in the staff locker room at the hospital, where one of the lockers is labeled Cummings, which has got to be a self-nod by set decorator Peg Cummings.
In order for director Rick Rosenthal to fully immerse us in the world of Halloween, there are many specific callbacks to specific moments within the first Halloween movie. Like how Karen suggests her friend gets a ride home from a Halloween party from a guy named Eddie Lee, to which she responds,
He's in Russellville.
You might also remember that the Haddonfield Graveskeeper mentions a town called Russellville in the first movie.
I remember over in Russellville, old Charlie Bowles, about 15 years ago.
When looking at the news coverage of the murders on Orange Grove Avenue, one of the EMTs, Bud, makes this comparison.
It looks like a goddamn homecoming.
It's a really interesting choice of words because one of the main plot points in the original Halloween regarded Laurie and who she would choose to go to the homecoming dance with.
Well, you could ask Dick Baxter. He'd go out with you. I'd rather go out with Ben Tramer.
Ben Tramer also makes an appearance in Halloween 2, or at least it's heavily implied that the masked kid who gets slammed by a police car was Tramer.
Yeah, I'm worried about Bennett Tramer. He isn't home yet. Yeah, and he left the party at 10.
You're just gonna brush past the fact that the cop who just hit Ben Tramer going 50 miles per hour gets out of his car and says, I didn't even see him? Like, you can't even give him the benefit of the doubt on that one.
That part is pretty funny if you're looking out for it. And I just love how the cop basically goes out of his way to hit the kid. His body is totally burned up, but the forensic dentist also seems to think that the victim is probably around Tramer's age. On a night that feels like it can't get any worse for Laurie Strode, Michael Myers is indirectly responsible for the death of her biggest crush. Halloween has become the nightmare that she can't wake up from. Then there's the security guy, Garrett. When we first meet him, he's reading a newspaper. Let's zoom in on the headline here. A dead ex-con with 6 bullets in him will float. This probably refers to the lung float test, an autopsy procedure that can help pathologists determine the true cause of death. But what I'm more interested in here is 6 bullets. As you probably know if you've seen the movie, Dr. Loomis loaded Michael with 6 bullets at the conclusion of Halloween in the Doyle house. He proceeds to bring this up whenever possible.
Tell the sheriff I shot him. I shot him 6 times. I shot him 6 times.
And fired 6 shots into me.
Couldn't have shot him 6 times.
You think I'm lying, Sheriff?
Speaking of Loomis, there's also a scene where he and the police discover that Michael broke into the elementary school. That's where they discover the Samhain graffiti that I mentioned earlier. When they enter the classroom, they come across a childlike drawing of a family of 4 with a knife stuck into the sister. Obviously, we're led to believe that this represents Judith, the sister that Michael stabbed in the opening of the first movie, but we later find out in the infamous twist that Laurie is Michael's other sister, and this drawing shows that's the reason he's coming after her. If you look closely, you'll see what appears to be another figure laying in the grass colored in red. I'm guessing that's supposed to be Judith, and this is Laurie who Michael is threatening with the knife. The bigger question I have is, who drew this? Have Michael's art skills not progressed since age 6 due to his incarceration in the sanitarium? Are we supposed to believe that he made this drawing in kindergarten and it's just been filed away at the school somewhere ever since? Or maybe it's just another kid's drawing that he repurposed to send his own message?
Just don't even think about it. Things will be better for you, I promise.
To be honest, I have a lot of questions about this movie. Like, how did the media find out about the babysitter murders before the sheriff of the town? Why does Loomis put his face so close to Laurie when he's asking if she's okay?
I'm sorry I left you. Are you all right?
That's so weird. And why are there no holes in Michael's mask after Laurie shoots him in the face? Are we supposed to believe that both of those shots went perfectly into the eye holes? Michael is 21 years old in this movie. It's even called out by Dr. Loomis at one point. So why do the credits say Michael Myers age 23? They actually made the same mistake in the first movie. But if you do the math, he is 21. Not sure how that happens. Why does Michael's mask look so funny from a low angle? Was this entire thing just an elaborate ruse by Jimmy to get a lap dance from Laurie Strode?
Men, you can't live with them, you can't live without them.
Yeah, I don't think that's how the saying goes. Help her out, Lloyd.
Women can't live with them, can't live without them.
Words of wisdom. The other question I've always had about this movie comes up in the third act when Loomis, Marion Chambers, and the state marshal show up at the hospital, not realizing that Laurie is injured in the parking lot. I always found it pointless how she waits until after they've gone inside to scream for help, but in analyzing this movie, the scene fits in with the bad dream theme that's been established. Not being able to find your voice totally sounds like something that would happen in a nightmare. I can even remember having dreams like that as a kid and then waking up to find myself mouthing the words with a dry throat. I think the line that ties this movie's themes together the best comes when Loomis explains the rituals of Samhain.
In order to appease the gods, the druid priests held fire rituals. Prisoners of war, criminals, the insane, animals were burned alive in baskets.
It is interesting that when he brings up rituals, he specifically mentions burning alive, because as we all know, that's Michael Myers' fate in this movie, at least for now. And that iconic shot of Michael Myers burning might be yet another direct reference to the thing from another world, which was referenced very heavily in the first Halloween, which was again a teaser for what John Carpenter would go on to work on.
By observing the way they died, the druids believed they could see omens of the future. 2,000 years later, we've come no further. Samhain isn't evil spirits. It isn't goblins, ghosts, or witches. It's the unconscious mind. We're all afraid of the dark inside ourselves.
We're all afraid of the dark inside of ourselves. The idea that I've come back to throughout this entire video, the idea that Laurie knows in her subconscious that Michael Myers is her brother, is the terrifying reality of this Halloween night. A reality that makes even evil spirits, goblins, ghosts, and witches seem tame by comparison. The idea is hammered home by the final scene, bringing the story full circle. Laurie is right back where she started, moving on to yet another hospital. The ambulance disappears into what looks like a foggy dreamscape. The news station, WWAR, who we heard the initial reports from about Michael Myers, is now on the scene getting coverage of his latest sets of victims. Michael lies face down on the ground, seemingly defeated once more. And the song that takes us into the end credits is none other than the song we heard when this nightmare began, Mr. Sandman, Bring Me a Dream. This ending was meant to be the death of Michael Myers, but as we now know, the character was just too profitable to stay dead. However, the next Halloween movie focuses on a completely different story, earning it the title of Black Sheep of the Halloween franchise. Halloween 3 is known as the Black Sheep, the Tokyo Drift, the Zelda 2 of the Halloween franchise. For that reason, the series connections we've now come to expect are more tenuous. But if we inspect the movie closely, some of its hidden secrets start to come into view. The story follows Dr. Daniel Chalice, who is called into the hospital to take care of an injured patient and prescribes a medication called Thorazine.
100 milligrams Thorazine.
This calls back to the first Halloween, where Dr. Loomis plans to use the same drug to sedate Michael Myers.
What do I give him when we take him in front of the judge?
Thorazine.
Barely be able to sit up.
That's the idea.
After realizing the suspicious circumstances of the patient's death, Chalice decides to go investigate with the man's daughter, Ellie Grimbridge. Before leaving town, he rings his ex-wife at a payphone. This is the same location featured in Halloween 2, where the nurse Karen announces that she never wants to go to another Halloween party.
Especially not at Stevie Mathis' house.
The biggest connection to the original 2 Halloween movies, though, which many viewers are not aware of, has to do with the reason that the villain, Connell Cochran, has put this elaborate plan into motion. Just 1 year after killing off the popular slasher Michael Myers, series producers John Carpenter and Deborah Hill were interested in continuing with their original idea of an anthology series, where each movie would tell an unrelated story taking place on Halloween night.
It's commonly thought that Halloween 3 Season of the Witch is the only movie in the Halloween franchise that doesn't feature Michael Myers, but that's not exactly true. We see Michael in a commercial for a television airing of the original Halloween, which tells us that Halloween is only a movie in this universe.
Tommy Lee Wallace was excited by the prospect of getting to tell a new story, so after declining to take over Halloween 2, he signed on as the director of the 3rd installment. That's actually his voice in the Silver Shamrock commercials.
All you lucky kids with Silver Shamrock masks, gather round your TV set, put on your masks, and watch.
I learned this while trying to determine if this was the same voice as Dr. Dementia, the horror movie marathon host in the first 2 films.
Lock your doors, bolt your windows, and turn off the lights.
They're similar, but I never did find out if Dr. Dementia was voiced by Tommy.
I mean, I haven't heard otherwise, so let's just go with it.
Halloween 3 is a weird movie, but the same oddities that turned off critics and fans in the early 80s are part of what makes it a cult classic decades later. The opening credits are displayed over a series of lines appearing close up on a TV screen. We don't know it yet, but what we're seeing is a very zoomed in version of the video that triggers the brainwash sequence. I love how right from the first shot, you already know this movie's gonna be funny. Just the way that this guy runs makes me laugh. An hour later, he arrives at a gas station where we see the news report about the missing Stonehenge monument.
It weighs more than 5 tons, making its disappearance a mystery indeed.
I'm not exactly sure why Cochran felt like he needed to steal the entire giant stone, because he only ended up using like a small chunk of that monument to enact his plan. Wouldn't it be smarter just to take like the chunk you need instead of removing an entire ancient monument? I get that we find out that all you need is an extremely small speck to do major damage, and that's what ends up in every single silver shamrock mask, but still, the amount they're using in these masks is absolutely tiny compared to that massive monument, which everyone realized was stolen.
So the Stonehenge news report sets up the big reveal about what the company's true intentions are. But the next program after this is also significant.
When we come back, Trina will be here to tell you what you can do about junk mail. Stay with us.
Junk mail is a form of overbearing advertising, which ties into the main message of this movie. The entire crux of Cochran's plan relies on children to be brainwashed by the Silver Shamrock commercials that dominate the airwaves in the days leading up to Halloween. Michael Myers may not show up to chase any teenagers this time, but Daniel Chalice is constantly chased by this catchy yet annoying Silver Shamrock jingle. Almost every location in the movie has screens or radios, manipulating children to buy their masks and wear them on the big Halloween night giveaway. There are so many screens, I started to wonder if I wasn't at Universal Studios. That's a stupid joke.
We are totally joking. Universal, please let us come to Halloween Horror Nights this year.
Just as the first Halloween makes a comment about the sexual revolution still ongoing from the 1960s, Season of the Witch taps into concerns of the effects of television on children, a discussion that was still picking up steam from the late 1970s. Even though television is no longer a relevant medium for young people, the themes of this movie remain pertinent. It was not that long ago that YouTube implemented strict rules regarding content made for children to make sure that they aren't subjected to targeted advertising, and also a bunch of other lame restrictions for some reason. Let's just say it was the only time ever where operating a horror-themed channel actually paid off.
Yo, Zach, let's make a Coco Melon horror movie.
Yeah, I'm sure that one won't get us struck down off YouTube immediately. We see the effects of over-advertising towards kids on Chalice's own offspring. They each get Silver Shamrock masks and huddle around the TV when the commercial comes on.
In 4 days to Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. In 4 days to Halloween, Silver Shamrock.
Yes, kids, you too can own one of the big Halloween 3. That's right, 3 horrific masks to choose from.
The masks are marketed as the Big Halloween 3. Yes, let's go ahead and get our jokes in about the title of the movie being in the movie. There are many 3s or triples in this movie, and I'm not sure how many of them are intentional, so I'm just gonna show them and let you decide. Also of note, the Deadly Silver Shamrock program at the end is airing on 3 different channels. There are perhaps other number games at play here. Mr. Grimbridge's room at the hospital is room 13. If you've seen my Final Destination videos, you know all about how that's the unlucky number, but in this case, it's also the reverse of 31, as in October 31, Halloween night. There are also a lot of instances of the number 6. The motel room that Chalice and Ellie stay in is room 6, the town's curfew goes into effect at 6 p.m., and the activation code for the commercial is 666, the number of the devil. It's not just the numbers that we should be paying attention to though. There are also several names that have a deeper meaning than what meets the eye. When Chalice gets to the hospital, his new patient is Harry Grimbridge, a shop owner who apparently discovered the Silver Shamrock secret and was hunted down by the androids who work for Mr. Cochran. The assassin promptly leaves the hospital, gets into his Plymouth Fury, and self-destructs.
Seeing as John Carpenter produced this movie and was absolutely instrumental in getting it made, this might have been yet another hint as to what one of his future projects would be. That's because his adaptation of the Stephen King novel Christine would come out a few years later. And for those of you who don't know what that's about, it's about a kid who buys a cursed 1958 Plymouth and then ends up destroying it because it has a mind of its own and starts killing people. Now, the car in Halloween 3 isn't an exact match, but it's the same make and model, so I feel like it's worth bringing up nonetheless. Before you light us up down in the comments, I know that John Carpenter has said multiple times over the years that this is his least favorite movie that he's ever made, but I've also seen recently that he started to come around on it, so yeah, I absolutely love it and I watch it all the time. I'm glad he's starting to like it too.
Is there also a second Stephen King connection in Season of the Witch? Probably not, but I'm gonna mention it anyways. toys. Inside Mr. Grimbridge's store, there are these jack-in-the-box clowns in a box that says boats. Director Tommy Lee Wallace would go on to direct a production where a creepy clown steals a young boy's boat. It would not come out for another 8 years, however, so I'm just gonna chalk this one up to just being a fun coincidence. Perhaps a more intentional detail can be seen when Ellie is brought in to ID her father after his death. The county sheriff's name badge reads Dunsmuir. Dunsmuir is a small town in Northern California, much like Santa Mira, where the movie takes place. I wouldn't be surprised if Dunsmuir was one of the inspirations for this location, though it seems a little bit less creepy than its film counterpart. Santa Mira is named after a fictional town from an earlier sci-fi horror movie and novel called Invasion of the Body Snatchers. This was the start of a trend. A lot of other properties would borrow this fictional location for their setting, including Airwolf, The Dark Tower, and even the Sharknado franchise. Chalice hangs out in a bar where he is once again bombarded by the overplayed Halloween mask commercial. He asks the bartender to change the channel and he puts on a football game, which we can hear in the background as Ellie Grimbridge introduces herself. Listen to the names called out by the announcer.
Finally brought him down. Not much time to do anything, but Coach Tommy Marshall has been...
These are both references to crew members of the movie. Barry Bernardi was an associate producer, and Tommy Marshall was best boy electrician. There are a few more crew reference Easter eggs that I spotted in the guest book when Chalice and Ellie get to the hotel, including costumer Francis Vega Aubrey, who signs as both Francis Aubrey and Mr. F. Vega, and property master James Rathbone.
Last episode when we covered Halloween 2, I mentioned how Nancy Loomis, also known as Nancy Kyes or Keys, I'm not exactly sure how to say it, appears in each movie in the original Halloween trilogy. This time she plays none other than Dr. Dan Chalice's ex-wife, Linda. I've seen this movie like 20 times and I never connected that Linda is played by the same actress as Annie, mainly because she comes off like such a huge Another actress who appears in each of the first 3 Halloween movies is Laurie Strode herself, Jamie Lee Curtis, because we of course see her during the television airing of Halloween in this movie.
I guess Dr. Chalice is not a fan. The other Jamie Lee Curtis cameo is a bit more covert. It is her voice that announces the early curfew in Santa Mira.
It's 6 o'clock. It's 6 o'clock. Curfew. Curfew.
There's one other notable cameo appearance, and it comes from Dick Warlock. This is the guy who played Michael Myers in Halloween 2, so we see him unmasked for the first time when he appears as one of Connell Cochran's androids. I know I don't normally talk about actor cameos and things you missed, but it felt relevant to bring up since this is a spiritual successor to the first 2 movies. It's kind of like how Shock Treatment is a follow-up to Rocky Horror. Similar crew, similar cast, similar artwork and feel, but totally different story. On the drive to Santa Mira, Chalice and Ellie read up on the town.
Proud community, predominantly Irish.
Irish Halloween masks?
California? You never know.
Outside of the company producing the mask being called Silver Shamrock, there are a lot of references to Ireland and Irish culture. So let's just go over all of them to make sure we've got our bases covered. Dr. Chalice and that weirdo he meets both appear to be alcoholics. Heavy drinking is a common trait of the stereotypical Irishman.
Drinking and doctoring, great combination.
Another thing Irish people are known for can be seen in this clip.
The bar he hangs out at is decorated with Irish murals. For example, this one on the back wall is a depiction of Anne Bonny, an Irish pirate from the 1700s. The other businesses in Santa Mira are also themed to Irish culture. Rafferty is a classic Irish name. Dublin is the capital of Ireland. The word shamrock is kind of overused. In addition to the factory, there's also a Shamrock store and a Shamrock Savings, though personally I would have gone with Leprechaun Loans. They end up staying at the Rose of Shannon Motel, a reference to the town of Shannon in Western Ireland. The booking office has a huge map of Ireland hanging on the wall. The Kupfer family arrives at the motel in a big RV covered in stickers. It's hard to make them out, but one of them definitely has the colors of the Irish flag. While touring the factory, we learn that Silver Shamrock used to be known for making toys, like these wind-up machines. This one depicts a group of musically inclined insects called the Love Bug Band, which is a reference to an Irish pop band from the 80s known as Love Bug. The depiction of them as insects may also be a connection to the method by which the Halloween masks kill the children. They are zapped by this laser from the Stonehenge piece, which causes their brains to turn into a swarm of insects that come pouring out of their heads. I don't care what you think about this movie, you gotta love that kill.
It's a great practical gag because you see it happen in real time, but it's not actually that hard to throw together.
Finally, there's the big reveal about why Cochran is targeting children. I'm gonna turn on the subtitles and...
All right, roll it.
It was the start of the year in our old Celtic lands, and we'd be waiting in our houses of wattles and clay. The barriers would be down, you see, between the real and the unreal. And the dead might be looking in to sit by our fires of turf. Halloween. the festival of Samhain.
Did you catch that? Although Cochran says it differently than Dr. Sam Loomis did in Halloween 2, he tells us that children are sacrificed during the festival of Samhain. Remember how Michael defaced the chalkboard, leading Loomis to believe that his crimes were part of a tribute? It turns out that Cochran's plan to eviscerate the minds of American trick-or-treaters comes from a similar motivation, which makes this the only through line between Halloween 2 and Halloween 3.
There is another hint about the true purpose of the Silver Shamrock masks hidden in one small detail at the motel. No Halloween 3 video would be complete without making fun of the, mature relationship between Dr. Chalice and Ellie Grimbridge. I mean, her father just died earlier that week and she's already trying to get it on with a mustache man literally more than twice her age. Seriously, you're going to investigate your father's murder? Why did you even pack that outfit? It's so ridiculous.
Playing an older guy who gets with younger girls is exactly what Tom Atkins was born to do. I mean, have you seen The Fog?
And I'm not even making this up, but I was looking into this movie and learned that the scenes in Santa Mira were filmed at a place called Lolita, California.
I do love a good joke, and this is the best ever.
Despite how unintentionally funny this movie can be at times, and believe me, it can be unintentionally funny. But despite all of that, the way the mystery's set up is actually really well done. Or at least kind of well done. There are a lot of details that set up the fact that the factory workers are robots, like the explanation of the hiring process.
He brought in every damn one of them factory people from the outside. You think he'd hire me, local boy? No way, turn me down flat.
And the realization that the initial assassin's autopsy only contains machine parts.
We've been doing an autopsy on part of the car.
It's still hilarious when you first hear it. There's also a little foreshadowing about the magic element of Cochran's plan. At the motel, a woman named Marge Gutman can be seen reading Carlos Estranada's The Eagle's Gift. From what I understand, this book is about sorcery. Although the magic used to sacrifice the mask-wearing children is referred to as witchcraft, and although one of the big Halloween 3 masks is a witch, there isn't an actual witch in the movie. I read somewhere that Tommy Lee Wallace named it after the Donovan song, Season of the Witch. Great song, but it is also not in the movie. The finale shows us kids going out to trick-or-treat all over the country, which, by the way, includes some beautiful shots of the Halloween sunset. Chalice rescues what he thinks is Ellie, but actually turns out to be Robo-Ellie. Not sure how or why Cochran had the time to make a perfect replica of her just to screw with old Chalice, or why the Robo-Ellie never tries to stop him until after he's destroyed the factory, but whatever, I'm into this.
I gotta say, I love this movie's generous take on how many cities actually celebrate Halloween anymore. I mean, I've lived in LA like 5 years, and I've never once had a kid come to my door to trick or treat on Halloween.
Yeah, I was disappointed to see the lack of decorations on most houses when I moved out here. After fighting her off, he inexplicably leaves the car behind and goes to the gas station where the movie started to try to get the hypnotic advert taken off the air. Who goes trick-or-treating at a gas station? Apparently these kids do, and they gather around the TV as Dr. Chalice begs the programmer to take the commercial off of the 3 channels that it's airing on.
Wait, you never went trick-or-treating at a gas station?
Do they give out gas or candy?
I don't remember.
This brings us back to the main theme that I discussed about Halloween 3. The Silver Shamrock advert is representative of every TV commercial attempting to corrupt and brainwash the youth into becoming their ideal consumer, regardless of any harm that this might be doing to them, physically or psychologically. The bugs and snakes that pour out of the young Kupfer boy's head are symbolic of what is going on inside the heads of children who are exposed to overbearing advertising from a young age. The parents of these kids do show some concern, saying things like "don't sit too close" or "turn down the volume," but ultimately the kids are drawn to the flashy colors and catchy tunes of the broadcast. During the factory tour, we learned that Silver Shamrock used to be a toy manufacturer, and eventually switched to hypnotic masks and television programs. In the 1980s, when this movie takes place, television was reaching the peak of its popularity, and Cochran was just following what the kids were paying attention to. TV shows were the new toys, and Silver Shamrock is a stand-in for any number of malicious private companies ready to take advantage of that.
Like most good movie satire, Halloween 3 was ahead of its time. I think it's because it's hard to notice that stuff when it's still happening all around you, but then when you revisit a movie a few years later, all of the satirical jokes hit you right on the head. It's kind of funny that 40 years later, Stranger Things 3 covered the exact same stuff as Halloween 3.
But if the years since 1978 have taught us anything, it's that you can't kill Michael Myers. And even if you could, he just won't stay dead for long. The Halloween anthology concept was abandoned after the poor reception of Halloween 3, and in 1988, the prolific slasher would wake up and set his sights on a new target. Which means we've got more things you missed to discuss in Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. Is there a greater meaning behind this mask seen in the Halloween display in the background of the pharmacy in Halloween 4? Maybe. Just maybe. Last time on Things You Missed, we talked about the strange subversive secrets that may change the way you look at Halloween 3. That movie, as unique as it may be, was not well received. It was the lowest grossing Halloween movie, and it did even worse with critics. For those in charge of the IP, it was time to go into damage control. The idea of making each movie a unique standalone story set on Halloween was abandoned in favor of resurrecting Michael Myers. But while the producers wanted to forget about Season of the Witch, the artists behind Halloween 4 may have felt a little bit differently. Take the school scene for example. Now this may be a total coincidence, but there are 3 doors with Halloween decorations in this set, and they are the big Halloween 3, skeleton, witch, and jack-o'-lantern. We don't see the masks themselves, but we do, curiously, see this exact combination of Halloween avatars later on at one of the houses that Jamie trick-or-treats at. That brings me to this mask, which may look a little bit familiar if you've seen Halloween 3. It almost seems to be a zombie-like version of the villainous mask maker Connell Cochran. There may be another mask that references Halloween 3, seen right here. You may remember one of the symptoms of the microchip being distributed in the Silver Shamrock masks was for bugs and snakes to pour out of the children's skulls. Of course, most of what we see in Halloween 4 is designed to make us think more about the initial 2 movies, Halloween and Halloween 2. When writing Halloween 2, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill made sure that Michael did not survive, because they felt they had creatively exhausted the character and wanted to open the door to other Halloween stories. But like their protagonist, Sam Loomis, even they could not kill Michael Myers. Over the years, there have been a number of soft reboots, like Halloween H2O 20 years later, and what I sometimes call Halloween H4O. Looking back on Return, I'm tempted to start calling it Halloween H10. Releasing and taking place 10 years after the original, it tells a story very similar to the initial Haddonfield murders, but still technically more of a sequel than a remake, setting the standard for decade anniversaries going forward. In fact, on this 10th anniversary, the Michael Myers character would be 31 years old. 1031 is Halloween. As a soft reboot, there are a lot of parallels to Halloween 1978, some of which were situated very creatively. We begin on a rainy night with a patient transfer, not unlike the opening of the first movie. I do not know why they always choose the day before Halloween to move him, it never works out well for them. I imagine after 10 years of being an invalid, the idea of Michael Myers as an actual threat kind of faded into legend, and the transfer personnel let their guard down.
How many bodies did you find?
It's hard to tell, they're all chewed up.
What, so you can't count them?
They also subtly let us know that Laurie Strode, the final girl from the past 2 movies, was killed off screen by simply mentioning that Michael only has one living relative, his niece Jamie. Yeah, they kinda do Laurie dirty here.
I think only Alex Browning could ever relate.
They do kind of honor Laurie though by naming Jamie after the actress Jamie Lee Curtis, who of course played Laurie. Man, if you guys don't know that Jamie Lee Curtis played Laurie at this point in the series, there's no helping you.
Jamie is supposed to be 8 years old, meaning that Laurie must have given birth to her pretty soon after escaping Michael Myers. She would have been no more than 19 when she had the baby. On the bright side, I guess she got over Ben Tramer pretty quick.
The next time someone tries to tell you Halloween 2018 didn't need to happen, remind them that it brought Ben Tramer back to life.
When we're first introduced to Jamie, she's in her room, having scary visions of Michael coming after her. Only we see Michael before she does, which doesn't really make sense. If we as the audience are seeing her visions, we should only be able to see the things that she sees. That's not why I brought this scene up though. On Jamie's door, I noticed what I assume are some of her drawings, such as this rendering of a princess named Jessica and a picture of a clown named Clowny.
Never be creative again.
This is a major clue about the lineage of evil in her family. You'll recall that the opening of Halloween featured the 6-year-old Michael Myers wearing a clown costume and stabbing his own sister.
I get what they were going for, but I'm just gonna say it, that was a lazy Easter egg.
Agreed. This clown drawing, her disturbing visions, and the fact that she chooses a clown costume for trick-or-treating are all clues that she is doomed to the same fate. She ultimately stabs her stepmother at the end of the movie and stands idly in the same pose that her uncle took 25 years prior. In each Halloween installment, I've discussed what I see as the main theme of each film, what the director was really trying to say. For Halloween 1, I talked about how early exposure to adult concepts can shape a child's mind for the worse. In addition to that, while it wasn't the main point of that video, I also talked about the idea that Michael Myers represents the personification of fate, as discussed in Laurie's English class.
That's right, Samuel's definitely personified fate. In Samuel's writing, fate is immovable. like a mountain. It stands where man passes away. Fate never changes.
I think the concept of fate really comes front and center in Halloween 4. Haddonfield was traumatized by the murders in 1978. Everyone in town who's old enough remembers it, and is willing to do just about anything to prevent it from happening again. Even the new sheriff, Meeker, who is stated to never overreact about anything, shuts down the town and imposes a curfew before even having any proof that the big, slow-walking man is back again. Mr. and Mrs. Carruthers have a million emergency numbers on their fridge, and the men at the bar are willing to take matters into their own hands to protect the town from another disaster.
But despite all of this, the night plays out almost exactly like it did 10 years prior. Annie and Lori were hired to babysit Lindsay and Tommy back in '78, and now it's Rachel Carruthers being forced to watch her adoptive sister Jamie in 1988. Annie plans to bring over her boyfriend Paul. In Rachel's case, she makes late night plans with a boy named Brady. Basically, they really played it safe for Michael's big return after Halloween 3 Season of the Witch didn't light the box office on fire. There's enough new stuff on the surface, but at its core, it's a very similar movie to Halloween, but just set 10 years later. And obviously, I think that's exactly what brought people back to the theater.
In the original, Michael gets a suit from a mechanic that he took out on the side of the road. This time, he visits an auto shop and basically recreates his wardrobe. Jamie is bullied by the kids at her school in almost the exact manner that Tommy Doyle was.
Boogeyman, ooh, the boogeyman, the boogeyman, the boogeyman, the boogeyman, the boogeyman, boogeyman, Jenny's uncle's a boogeyman.
While these details are probably just evidence that some things never change, it is the kills in Halloween 4 that really cement the idea that Michael Myers terrorizing Haddonfield is truly an inescapable fate. In the first Halloween, we saw Michael attempt to recreate the horror he had first created at age 6, using promiscuous teenage babysitters as stand-in victims for his sister Judith, even going so far as to arrange them under his sister's tombstone. 10 years after that, the kills now seem to be recreations of the night he came home.
For example, after Michael arrives in Haddonfield, his first victim there is a dog in both the 1978 and 1988 versions. After Rachel and Jamie are gathered by the police, they take shelter in the sheriff's house. We only see the aftermath of Deputy Logan's death, but the sheriff's daughter Kelly is taken out next. She and Brady would fill the role of horny teens just like Bob and Linda in the original. And on top of that, her death is kind of a combination of Linda and Bob's. Remember, Bob was pinned to the wall with a knife, and then Michael pretended to be Bob to get close to Linda. So this time things are slightly changed. Michael sits in a rocking chair pretending to be Deputy Logan, and he uses his shotgun to impale Kelly and pin her into a door. Then Brady is strangled, which happens to be the same fate Annie and Linda suffered in Halloween.
Finally, there's a major parallel in the final chase. Rachel fills the role of Laurie Strode in this one, as a responsible babysitter trying to protect the kid that she's watching. We saw Laurie hide in a closet and use a coat hanger to poke out Michael's eye and temporarily blind him in Halloween 1. Then in Halloween 2, she shoots him in the eyes, or I guess just slightly above the eyes, but the drip down once again renders him unable to see. Or apparently use any kind of critical thinking at all. Rachel, who is stated to have been babysat by Laurie when she was younger,
Your mother used to babysit me when I was your age. I bet you didn't know that.
apparently picked up a thing or two from her because she saves the day at the school by blinding Michael with a fire extinguisher, which leads to this hilarious interaction.
In the school. We heard the alarm. He's inside. Jesus, where? In the school.
There are other similarities to 1978 as well. For example, we see other teens dressed up as Michael Myers.
Is that him? Is that him?
Yes.
What? What do you mean, yes? I mean, you'd think he'd be a little bit more apprehensive after the whole Ben Tramer incident where an innocent kid in a Michael mask ended up getting killed. Actually, history does kind of repeat itself here. Our good old Illinois boys are concerned when they hear about the curfew and decide to take matters into their own hands. And it turns out they shot someone named Ted Hollister. Poor Ted Hollister. We never even saw your face. And now you're gone.
Damn, man.
Then, later that night, after murdering someone, they fire their guns in the air while driving past the police officers on their way into Haddonfield, where a serial killer is currently on the loose. I wanna like these good old Illinois boys, but they're just not very smart. it. It's no wonder most of them get taken out by Michael. However, that does lead to Rachel getting control of their truck and ramming it into her masked stalker. And just like Halloween 1, there's that fake out moment where he appears to be dead, then rises up using the same sit-up motion. Then at the end, when Michael is seemingly defeated for good, like at least for this movie, we see that Jamie still can't change her fate, because the evil seems to be passed down to her, and we see her point of view as she puts on the clown mask and stabs her mother, a scene that Loomis recognized as being identical to Michael's attack on his sister.
So while we don't have a long in-class lecture about fate this time around, the idea of immovable fate is the driving force behind the events of Halloween 4. We even have this overly religious reverend who Dr. Loomis catches a ride into Haddonfield with. I mean, he specifically says that you can't kill damnation because it doesn't die like a man does. And next, that the apocalypse always has a name and a face.
Well, in this case, that name is Michael, and that face is William Shatner, looking decidedly more surprised than he does in earlier installments in this franchise.
There's also the dog named Sunday. Sunday is the holy day in Christianity, and Michael is made out to be the spawn of hell. Even the security guard at the hospital seems to think so.
Jesus ain't got nothing to do with this place. Welcome to hell.
So it seems like the Reverend may be onto something with his apocalyptic provisions. Then again, that Reverend also says things like,
I saw it clear as breasts and blue suede shoes.
Do you have any idea what that means, Jimmy?
No, I don't.
Yeah, he's also DUI. That's a pretty serious crime, and it goes completely unaddressed. As does the fact that this diner is just filled with pictures of regular Abraham Lincoln. I want to take a closer look at the costumes of some of Jamie's classmates at the school. This kid in particular wears a getup from the 80s cartoon Mask, and it has a red truck with an explosion. It almost seems to be a reference to Michael Myers, who of course wears a mask and steals a red truck, which causes an explosion. I'm guessing that explosion is also why the phone lines are down later, and this image almost looks like a burning cross, maybe a symbol for the Judgment Day mentioned by the Reverend.
I ain't got till Judgment Day!
When Jamie is picking out her own costume, she browses through all of the other costumes worn by her classmates before settling on her clown suit. This essentially says that she cares more about doing her own thing than fitting in with the other classmates, which I think ties into the idea that I keep on talking about, that nothing can sway her from her own destiny. Interestingly, the kid who compliments her is the same kid who was bullying the shit out of her at school. So she kind of ends up fitting in just by being herself, or, you know, the costume budget was really low.
After picking out her costume, Jamie is scared by an encounter with Michael. There's actually a clue that he's going to be in there when they first pull up, and you see the big industrial hook on the truck across the street. If you pay close attention, you'll remember it from when Dr. Loomis explored the auto shop earlier in the movie. Also, the girl who drops Rachel and Jamie off at the drugstore is named Lindsay. I'm pretty sure that's grown-up Lindsay Wallace, the little girl who survives the first movie.
Anyway, back on topic. When Michael scares Jamie in the costume area, she screams, and Rachel comes running and just intentionally knocks over the sticker display. Why does she do that? I mean, look at this, play it back. You just see her clearly go out of her way to knock this thing over.
It's very reminiscent of this beautiful moment.
I couldn't stop.
And then why do they not just look right across the store and see Michael? This whole scene makes no sense. I mean, I know I already massacred our good old Illinois boys, but I think Rachel is maybe also not the smartest.
Metal! God damn it, it's metal!
What does that mean?
You don't know what metal is? You know, like solid material, strong, shiny, conducts electricity. There's no hope for you, is there? Anyway, I think that's just about it for Halloween 4, unless you have anything to add.
There is this one part where when Rachel is at Chief Meeker's house, she comes downstairs to talk to Deputy Logan. And if you look in the background, Michael pops his head out. You might have missed that, so we'll tack it on there, just in case.
Halloween 5 is a movie that raises more questions than answers, but it answers at least one thing I was wondering about, but probably nobody else cared about in Halloween 4. Number 5 would be The Revenge of Michael Myers, and the opening is a continuation of the ending of 4, where Michael is shot repeatedly and falls into a hole. Here we see what happened next, which may be a little nod to how Halloween 2 handled its intro and wouldn't be the only one. Michael escapes through this tunnel to make it to a river, which he floats downstream to escape. I'm reminded of this line from Reverend Jackson Sayer, who gives Dr. Loomis a lift early on in Halloween 4. Many of his lines fit in with the theme of fate seen in that movie, which you can hear all about in the previous episode of Things You Missed. But there are a couple that just seem like weird lines, like this one.
I saw it on your face back there in the dust. I saw it clear as breasts and blue suede shoes.
Which I still don't really understand. But there's also this hymn that he sings at the end of his scene.
Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful, beautiful river.
Could this have been a foreshadowing that Michael's supposed fate was going to be in this river? Whatever the plans were for Halloween 4, it's pretty clear that the next sequel changed them. Halloween 5 would, as always, not bring back the previous movie's director, in this case Dwight Little, who seemingly just wanted to quit while he was ahead. To pronounce the new director's name, I give you Halloween expert and Frenchman Jimmy Champagne.
Dominique Othénin-Girard is the correct pronunciation, and despite the fact that my last name is Champagne, I'm not actually from France. I did a video on Halloween 5 a few years ago, and I had to learn exactly how to say that name. When I saw Halloween 4 for the first time, and specifically how it ended, it really affected me because I was the same age as Jamie, and I really wanted her to win. But over the years, and after seeing Halloween 5 and where the story went from there, I think it actually could have been kind of cool to see Jamie take up the knife and mask. If you think about it though, it's absolutely insane that this ending was greenlit in the first place, because the only reason Halloween 4 exists is because people were so mad that Michael Myers was killed off in Halloween 2 and then not featured in Halloween 3. The point I'm trying to make is that as the Halloween franchise went on, there was a clear divide between the producers, the filmmakers, and the fans, and this movie suffers the most out of any of them for it.
To try to change things up a little bit, I guess, Girard tries to humanize Michael Myers, which kind of defeats the point of Michael Myers.
Calling the mask in Halloween 5 a mess would be the understatement of the year, but it's actually pretty interesting that it was sculpted by Greg Nicotero of The Walking Dead and Creepshow fame. I've always struggled to understand why instead of using the mask from Halloween 4 in this movie, because that movie's ending bleeds directly into this movie's, they just sculpted a new one after Greg Nicotero's head, which is why it has a teardrop shape and looks completely different than any other mask in the franchise.
I don't really know what his motivation was for making a character so well known and well stated to be inhuman seem more humanized. It sounds like he just has this weird crush on the shape.
Such a vulnerable little girl against a massive, amazing, strong man who nothing stops. When he has an idea in his mind, he just goes straight.
But something tells me you don't. That being said, we've talked about the first 4 movies, so we might as well do these ones. I'll actually admit that the opening title sequence to Halloween 5 is a little bit creative. In 1 and 2, we see a pumpkin over a black screen with the credits. In 3, we see the credits play over this digital display of a pumpkin to fit the sci-fi horror genre of that movie. And in 4, we just see more of a pumpkin patch and some other stuff. So 5 kind of reinvents that concept by cutting in quick splices of a pumpkin being massacred by a knife, some of which are shot from inside the pumpkin. This would be the movie where we really go inside Michael Myers, for better or for worse.
I'm gonna go with better. No, worse. It's definitely worse.
As I mentioned, Michael escapes his hunters by letting the river carry him downstream, where he meets a hobo and his pet bird, Tippy.
There's nothing out there, Tippy.
In our Halloween 1 video, we talked about how characters like Loomis, Marion, and Lee were all named after characters from Alfred Hitchcock's classic horror film, Psycho. For this reason, I think Tippy may be named after the actress that debuted in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, Tippi Hedren.
Anyway, a year has gone by and Jamie is still regularly having nightmares about her uncle, and she's also gone mute as part of the trauma she experienced last Halloween. This is a very heavy-handed sign that she's connected to Michael and that her visions are actually her seeing through the shape's eyes. But looking back, this is also definitely part of the director's attempt to humanize Michael Myers, which was like his main goal going into this movie. I don't know if you guys knew that. I mean, if I was making the middle movie in a trilogy, 5 movies into a franchise, that's about when I would switch things up and completely change the motivations of the main villain. In the last movie, Jamie is one of the survivors. She's who we empathize with. She's who we're rooting for through the entire thing. Michael Myers doesn't talk. Now she doesn't talk. It's how we relate to him a little bit better. I don't really think it makes a lot of sense.
Last year, Jamie wore a clown costume, just as Michael had many years ago, but this year she goes as a princess. You may remember the princess and clown drawings on her door in Halloween 4, so this choice represents the idea that she's now going down the good path rather than the evil one. However, she can't fully get rid of the clown and the evil. She still has dreams about that night. The care facility that she's staying in is decorated with items like a balloon-themed lamp, this clown light switch, a clown-themed height chart, and this absolutely comforting clown placed in her room to watch her sleep. We also see a clown doll at her home, even though she never goes there in this movie. You would think maybe the people taking care of her would put all of this clown stuff away to avoid bringing back those bad memories, but it seems they've just opted for the get over it sooner rather than later approach. The other survivor is Rachel, her adoptive sister. She gets home to get ready for a Halloween party.
I'm coming!
Why does she yell, "I'm coming," as she's running to the phone? Like, she does realize the caller can't hear her until after she picks up the receiver, right?
Can someone give me one good reason why they decided to do Rachel so dirty? She was one of the best characters.
Loomis warns her to get out of the house, and then she's just out of breath upon reaching the edge of her own property. Time to hit the cardio, Rachel. At this point, the cops show up, accompanied by circus music for some reason. And no, we didn't add that. That's just the music that's in the movie.
It honestly took me years of rewatches to notice this music that plays underneath the cops. There is so much bizarre shit going on in Halloween 5 that it didn't even register as weird to me.
At this point, we start to see Michael acting differently than he has in other movies, but he would not be the only one.
In the original Halloween movies, Michael Myers is shown to be this unstoppable force. He stalks and comes after his victims slowly, and he shows no mercy. In this one, there are multiple points where he doesn't kill a victim even though he has a clear chance to. And I've thought about this a lot over the years, and the only explanation I can come up with is that this is yet another shallow attempt to humanize Michael Myers. For example, he sees Rachel in the house, he puts his hand on the clothing rack here, and instead of doing anything about it, he just walks out of the room right after. What happened there? Did he leave his Viagra in the car? Something similar happens as he watches Sammy and Tina outside the hospital later that day, but doesn't make his move. Then later on, once the killing has begun, he finds himself behind the wheel of a large automobile. We all know that Michael Myers walks slow because that's part of his character. It's been established from the beginning, but is there any reason he has to drive slow as well? The only logical explanation is that he's taking time to enjoy stalking his victims. The corpse shrine he builds in the attic of the Myers house, which by the way is completely different than the one we've seen in the other movies, suggests that there's an art to the way that Michael Myers does his killing. That, along with when he stops his rampage to listen to Loomis tell him how he might be able to cure his rage, and then again when Jamie calls him uncle, are clear signs that maybe he does have a human side after all. And that's when they take it too far by making this badass slasher start crying.
Michael is not the only one to undergo a change in behavior in this movie. If he's becoming more human, I think maybe Dr. Loomis is becoming less human. Billy is a fellow patient at Jimmy's clinic, and I think they bond over their speech issues. He has a stutter, and she's unable to speak at all anymore. When little Billy comes in to check on Jamie and see if she's okay, Loomis just ushers him out and slams the door on him. The way that he talks to Jamie is perhaps the scariest part of this movie.
About your stepmother, Jamie.
What?
Then he also tells Jamie that Michael dug up the corpse of a 9-year-old girl, which we never see happen, so did he just make that up to scare her? And in the finale, without telling her the plan or anything, he just offers her up to Michael.
You want her! Here she is!
No disrespect to Donald Pleasance, but Loomis should just be shot at this point. Now, I only noticed one crew reference Easter egg, and that is the badge of this police officer, Markland, which references the prop master on Halloween 5, Sean E. Markland. However, there were also some callbacks to other Halloween movies, so let's just start with Halloween 1.
I like that movie, so I'll take this one. There are a ton of references to mundane details in the original movie, like this conversation between Sammy and Tina.
Sammy, why don't you bag Spitz tonight? Couldn't do that. Oh, sure you could. Oh, no, I can't.
Which is essentially the same conversation that Annie and Lori have in the car.
Sure you could. All you have to do is go up to somebody and say, you want to go to the dance? You could do that, I couldn't.
The way that Michael slams on the brakes when Tina asks him to stop at the gas station is eerily reminiscent of exactly what he does in Halloween 1. The way that Jamie sees Michael standing outside her window is also exactly how Lori sees him outside her window in Halloween 1. And then of course there's a scene where Jamie is chased through clotheslines which have large sheets hanging on them. That's something we talked about in the videos for Halloween 1 and 2, and it's actually great to see that this movie is going back to basics by making most of the victims teenagers who want to get laid.
You guys want to come skinny dipping?
Are you serious, Tina? This is the same chick who just got done complaining that it was too cold standing outside the car for 2 seconds. Now she wants to go skinny dipping in Illinois in October. There are also a couple of similarities to Halloween 2 and Halloween 4 in this one, like the false scare involving someone dressed up as Michael Myers. We've also seen several examples of the opposite, where Michael is disguised as one of the regular human characters. This time it's another guy who happens to be named Michael.
Michael, open the door.
The movie also brings back the Halloween 4 concept of Jamie riding on someone's back to escape out a window, and continues the tradition from Halloween 1 and 4 of taking out a dog very early on. When we see the shrine of all of his victims in the attic and Jamie sees the dog, it still barks somehow. Also, half the jump scares in this movie are from animals. I do not know how there's just like a picture of Coraline's mom right here, or how Dr. Disrespect manages to show up on a wanted poster. I do not know why there's this weird jump cut when Mikey is getting jumped by Michael. I do not know why this lady looks directly at the camera. And I do not know why the end credits feel the need to specify that the names represent the cast of characters, as if we've never seen a movie before.
And also, real quick, did they think we wouldn't notice that this is dubbed?
We just had a distress call from the clinic. They haven't been able to reach them again. There were 4 men up there.
There is one character that we have not mentioned yet, and that is Mole Man. No, I'm talking about Dr. Terrence Wynn, who is basically just an unsolved mystery in this movie, but would return in the next movie, The Curse of Michael Myers. As the name implies, Michael Myers will also be returning in the 6th movie, which would be the last of what is now called the Thorn trilogy. What I will say about the Cult of Thorn is it would have been cool if its introduction opened up the series to more powerful and evil entities outside of just the shape. So naturally, as with the ideas of Halloween being an anthology franchise and Jamie being an antagonist, that is not what happened. In Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, a new nuclear family lives in the old Myers house. Well, you know, it isn't exactly the Myers house, but it's closer than the monstrosity they used in Halloween 5. The parents are named John and Deborah Strode, the aunt and uncle of Laurie Strode from Halloween 1, who are named after the producers of that original movie, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill. For added authenticity, John Strode's first line in the movie sounds exactly like something John Carpenter would have said after making Halloween 2.
Enough! This Michael Myers!
While Carpenter and Hill did date for a few years in the late 70s while they made Halloween, the only child their relationship birthed in real life was one of the top 10 most lucrative horror franchises of all time. The 6th entry of this franchise would feature many more connections to the 1978 original, as well as many other surprising secrets. Thank you for riding the Halloween Express. The next stop is Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. When we pull into the station, you'll exit to the left on the Producer's Cut platform. Yeah, I decided to use the infamous Producer's Cut as the basis for this episode of Things You Missed, but I will still mention one Easter egg that can only be found in the theatrical cut. As with all the previous Halloween films we've passed through on this journey, I will once again be joined by my co-conductor, Jimmy Champagne.
So Zach and I got these shirts made from Halloween 6 and we realized that it had a not friendly YouTube word on it, so I spent all this time taping it out and then I realized this is my recording angle. It's a little known fact that the producer's cut of my last name has a G in it.
Yeah, I might need to take that joke out of the CZ cut of this video. As I mentioned, the parent characters in Halloween 6 pay homage to the Carpenter-Hill duo, who went on to collaborate on many more films together, one of which is the 1980 movie The Fog, which is also referenced here in Curse. Roll it.
This is the famous Tim Strode stomach pounder. You down for the challenge?
If you've seen The Fog, the line might sound very familiar.
Yes, ma'am. Mom, can I have a stomach pounder and a Coke?
In 1982, Carpenter and Hill produced Halloween 3, which is also honored here. The woman who runs the boarding house next door to the Myers house goes by the name of Mrs. Blankenship, the same name as the woman that Mr. Grimbridge was supposed to have had dinner with shortly before his disappearance in Season of the Witch.
October 21st, dinner with Minnie. Minnie Blankenship, he never showed up.
The Curse of Michael Myers begins as we see an older Jamie Lloyd, the little girl from Halloween 4 and Halloween 5, escaping from Smith's Grove Sanitarium. We don't know that it's Smith's Grove yet, but if you pause the movie right here, you can see that it's actually a Smith's Grove van chasing Jamie right before it forces her off the road. But when we do officially find out later on, it makes some nice parallels to the previous movies. In Halloween and Halloween 4, Michael Myers is the one to escape Smith's Grove on a rainy October 30th night. And now it's Jamie, the girl once poised to be his successor. She even steals a car just as Michael did after both of his escapes. There's also this very dark detail in the producer's cut of Halloween 6 that implies that Michael Myers is the father of Jamie Lloyd's child, or as I learned to call him in Cinemassacre's Monster Madness, Uncle Dad. And you guys aren't going to believe this, but it gets even darker from there. So in this movie, Jamie is played by an actress named JC Brandy, who was 20 years old at the time. But since Jamie was 8 years old in Halloween 4, and this one takes place in 1995, that would mean she's around 15 years old when she delivers her baby, and that is just dark and gross. In the theatrical cut, they added this shot of a bunch of embryos to imply that Steven is a test tube baby, just to make it a little less disturbing for the general movie-going audience, but then in turn, they also made it more disturbing for religious moviegoers, so yeah, it's like 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. You're gonna offend someone with a plot point like that. On a lighter note, there's a weird coincidence with this trilogy of Halloween movies and the way that they're subtitled. So the first one is called Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. The fifth one is called Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. And the sixth one is called Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. And weirdly enough, there's another film franchise that used the same subtitles for its 4th, 6th, and 8th movies. And that franchise is the Pink Panther. Yes, Pink Panther 4 is called The Return of the Pink Panther. Pink Panther 6 is called The Revenge of the Pink Panther. And Pink Panther 8 is called The Curse of the Pink Panther.
Each of those Pink Panther movies came out before its Halloween counterpart, and on top of that, there was a Pink Panther remake in 2006, 1 year before Halloween's remake in 2007, and that remake had a sequel, the Pink Panther 2, in 2009, just 6 months before the Halloween remake sequel, Halloween 2. But Pink Panther comparisons aside, Curse of Michael Myers features Michael coming back to Haddonfield under the orders of the mysterious Cult of Thorn to steal Jamie Lloyd's baby and sacrifice his half-cousin to pass his curse onto the child. With the franchise branching away from the lore of the earlier movies, this film tries to get back to basics by tying the modern Michael Myers back into the Celtic mythology that backed Halloween 2 and Halloween 3. Director Joe Chappelle even brought back Donald Pleasance's blatant mispronunciation of the Gaelic festival Samhain when Tommy Doyle explains it all to Kara Strode.
According to Celtic legend, one child from each tribe was chosen to be inflicted with the curse of Thorn, to offer the blood sacrifices of its next of kin on the night of Samhain.
Halloween.
The sacrifice of one family meant sparing the lives of an entire tribe.
Samhain was explained in Halloween 2 to be the source of Michael's benevolent evil, and in Halloween 3, the motivation for Connell Cochran's terrifying Halloween plot. Curse takes the involvement of the holiday one step further by connecting it to these ancient runes and explaining that the dates of Michael's attacks are determined by the appearance of the Thorn constellation. And as Tommy explains this, his face is way too close to Kara's hair. I guess he and Loomis have that in common.
Are you alright?
Yeah, that definitely is a weird thing that keeps happening.
Also, every time I watch this part about the runes now, I'm just gonna see the word simp right there. Thanks, internet.
A good amount of people are just doing the reasonable thing and just making jokes.
Anyways, at the end of Jamie's escape from Smith's Grove, she crashes into a pumpkin patch at a barn, a very similar location to where she gave Michael the slip in Halloween 5. Only this time, Jamie is not so lucky. Throughout this mini-series of Halloween franchise Things You Missed episodes, Jimmy and I have attempted to point out all of the lesser-known callbacks, the tributes, the homages to the original Halloween. Despite everything we've already brought up in the first 5 movies, this 6th entry may be the most derivative of all. But there is another massively iconic horror movie that Curse of Michael Myers feels very influenced by, and that is Stanley Kubrick's 1980 masterpiece, The Shining.
It just so happens that your hosts today are the perfect people to be pointing out these connections because I have a channel that's practically dedicated to Halloween and Zach never misses a reference to The Shining. Zach wrote that joke to say he never seems to miss a reference to The Shining, but I'm just gonna come out and tell you guys he never misses one. It's a fact.
So if you're somehow unfamiliar with The Shining, 1, what are you doing with your life? And 2, here's what you need to know. A former teacher named Jack Torrance moves his family into an isolated hotel for the winter so he can take a job as the hotel's winter caretaker. His son Danny has a psychic and clairvoyant ability known as the Shine, allowing him to see the ghosts of the hotel's past. After being shut in long enough, the ghosts get to Jack, causing him to go crazy and chase his family with an axe.
Halloween is an unlikely franchise to do The Shining because Michael Myers is a slasher villain and The Shining is a psychological horror movie, but if you keep any franchise going long enough, you're bound to try something new.
The Shining connection all starts with Kara's son, Danny. Not only does he share a name with Danny Torrance from The Shining, but he's a young boy with a bowl cut and psychic voices in his head. Danny Strode hears the voice of Dr. Wynn, who encourages him to kill for Michael Myers, while Danny Torrance hears Tony, his imaginary friend who warns him about the dangers posed by his shine. Danny Strode even has visions just like Danny Torrance does. About halfway through the movie, Dr. Loomis tries to warn the Strodes that Michael Myers is gonna come for them. He does so by just straight up walking into their house.
This dude is out of control. He could have just waited by the front door for them to come home.
After warning Deborah about this danger, she wants to get the kids out of Haddonfield.
I'm getting the children out of here, at least until I know what's going on. John, I want you to come with us.
This is basically beat for beat the same conversation that Wendy Torrance has with her husband in The Shining, when she tries to suggest that her Danny should be driven to a doctor in town for his well-being.
I think maybe he should be taken to a doctor.
You think maybe he should be taken to a doctor?
Earlier, I talked about the character John Strode being named after John Carpenter, but perhaps there is a second meaning here as well. He seems to represent Jack Torrance in this story, whose real name in the Shining novel is John Torrance. I first realized the similarity between these characters when I saw John Strode's first reaction to his wife's hysteria.
You've lost it now, you know that, Deborah? You've just lost it.
It's very similar to Jack's response to Wendy's claim that someone is with them in the hotel.
Are you out of your f***ing mind?
They're both alcoholic, abusive father figures. John Strode even drinks Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey, the very same beverage selected by Jack in The Shining. Heck, they even use the exact same line at one point.
Come out, wherever you are.
Come out, wherever you are.
The way Michael Myers approaches Deborah, slowly as her back is turned, is very similar to how Jack approaches Wendy as she's reading through the stacks of paper on the typewriter. There's no sudden movement or jump scare, just the looming realization that the character is not alone. Michael eventually takes her out with an axe, a weapon that he's never used before, and at the time of making this video, has never used since. Check me on that, Jimmy.
Yeah, that is the only time Michael Myers uses an axe.
I'm sure it's no coincidence that he wields Jack Torrance's main weapon of choice. Both Dannys go into these hypnotic trances later in the movie, and both of their mothers have a similar reaction at the first sight of danger.
Danny, run!
Remember how I said I'd be using one thing from Halloween 6's theatrical cut? Well, the room that Kara escapes from in the sanitarium is room 237, the same number as the most haunted room in the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. Alright, I've had my fun. I'm gonna throw it over to Jimmy Champagne to talk about all of the Halloween 1 connections.
Thanks, Zach. I'll just start at the beginning of the movie and move on from there. When Jamie is escaping the asylum, a woman who helps her out gets lifted up and impaled on this thorn-like object on the wall, which is very similar to how Michael took out Bob Sims back in '78, especially how he just stands there and admires his work.
Also, Bob Sims has the same last name as Barry Sims, the radio show host in 6, although I don't think they're related. It doesn't seem like Barry would be so exploitative of Haddonfield and Michael Myers if he had a family member get whacked in the original Rampage.
That night when Tommy Doyle logs on to the Project Michael Myers website, Michael Myers' face flashes on the screen in the exact same way that he appeared out of the dark at the top of the Doyle staircase back in 1978.
If this came out today, there would be a whole Project Michael Myers ARG leading up to the release of the movie.
Yeah, I hope you're paying attention, Nightmind. Anyway, we're reintroduced to Dr. Terrence Wynn, who appeared as a young administrator at Smith's Grove back in the first movie.
After 32 years, guess who is finally relinquishing his duties as chief administrator of Smith's Grove?
No, it's not the same actor, but many people don't realize that this is a character who was featured in the first movie, and it's definitely not their fault because he was only in like 2 shots. And of course, the other Halloween 1 character who came back in a big way was Tommy Doyle.
He's always staring out his window. Last night I caught him watching me.
Tommy Doyle staring out a window? I guess some things never change. There's even a moment where young Danny sees Michael Myers across the way from Tommy's window, just like young Tommy did in the first movie. Then there's the Haddonfield bus terminal where we hear this announcement.
Bus 34 from Peoria, Russellville, and Gardner, with through service to Chicago, Illinois, will be arriving in 5 minutes.
But Russellville is one of the nearby towns that was mentioned in Halloween's 1 and 2.
I remember over in Russellville.
We've still got a bunch more to cover, like Halloween 1 connections, crew reference Easter eggs, and this one single pumpkin. But Zach is giving me the eye right now, so I think we're supposed to take a break and come right back with even more things you missed.
In our previous episodes, we talked about how Michael always seems to appear in tandem with these bed sheets, which we theorized is related to his tendency to go after teenagers like his sister Judith, who are always focused on trying to go to bed with one another. At this point, I think the meaning is lost, and the bed sheets are just more of a running gag. We see them hanging up outside as Deborah is chased out of the house, and Mr. Strode later finds one of the sheets covered in red in the washing machine. And this one isn't technically a bed sheet, but Michael notably appears behind a curtain as Mrs. Blankenship is telling Michael's backstory. You can only spot him as the lightning is striking outside.
Remember how in the original, bullies harass Tommy and make him fall on his pumpkin? Well, in Curse, something very similar happens to Danny, who is startled and drops his pumpkin on the ground, only this time Tommy's the one who causes it.
Sorry.
At this point, Barry Sims is well into his Halloween night radio broadcast from Haddonfield, and during a commercial break, Michael takes him out inside of a vehicle in a very similar scene to how we see Annie die in the first Halloween movie.
Meanwhile, we check in on Beth and her boyfriend Tim as she tells the story of Michael's first attack back in 1963 while walking up the same stairs that Judith Myers and her boyfriend walked up that very night. Then they sleep together on the same bed, or at least in the same bedroom where Judith became Michael Myers' first ever victim. After getting busy upstairs, Tim jumps in the shower and Michael hands him a towel, pretending to be Beth. This is something that seems to happen once in each movie. Michael pretended to be Bob under the ghost costume to catch Linda off guard in 1, he pretended to be Bud to get close to Karen in the hot tub in 2, he poses as Deputy Logan to sneak up on Kelly in 4, and he takes the wheel of Mikey's car in costume to pick up Tina in 5.
And finally, when Kara jumps out a window to escape Michael Myers and the Cult of Thorn, we see her lying face down on the ground just like Michael did at the end of Halloween 1978.
Now, being the former Illinois boy that I am, I've always been interested in Haddonfield's location in the state. Haddonfield is not a real place, but we've seen it placed all over the Prairie State, including south of Hardin County, which is way at the bottom, in Warren County, which is way to the west, and in Livingston County in the northeast, closer to Lake Michigan. In Halloween 6, we get more of an exact map placement thanks to the bus map shown right here. The order of these stops is pretty accurate, with the exception of Bloomington and Funk's Grove being switched. Using this map places Haddonfield right around where the village of Odell is in real life, which is part of Livingston County. I would say that this is a nice attention to detail, but a newspaper later in the movie still features Haddonfield news in the Warren County Gazette. As I've mentioned before, Haddonfield is supposed to be more of an Everytown USA sort of place, so the actual location isn't really that important, but it can still be fun to analyze this map. By the way, when we first see the bus station, there's a sign at the desk that says "Back in 20." This is obviously a reference to the franchise coming back for Halloween Kills, which was supposed to come out in 2020, but was delayed 1 year due to the COVID-19 outbreak.
Shut up, Zach.
I'm guessing that joke will not be in the Jimmy Champagne cuts.
Speaking of locations though, a whole bunch of the Thorn trilogy was shot in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we see a reference to this in a magazine on John's desk that's opened up to Salt Lake City real estate listings.
There's also one crew reference Easter egg that I was able to spot in the form of a sticky note posted by the Strode's phone. It lists the number for Dr. Duane, which is likely a nod to Duane Manwiller, the first assistant camera on Halloween 6. While we're talking about the production side of things, the film was distributed by Dimension Films, which is part of the production company Miramax. Dimension was also responsible for other high-profile horror franchises such as Hellraiser, and it seems they really wanted to push it at the time. According to Rivers of Gru, $1 million was taken out of the budget for Curse of Michael Myers and given to Hellraiser Bloodline, which would come out the next year. In addition to that, Halloween 6's director, Joe Chappelle, had to come and finish directing Bloodline uncredited after the original director quit. So it comes as no surprise that they tried to promote the new Hellraiser movie by putting this Pinhead-inspired jack-o'-lantern on the front porch. There are actually quite a few additional horror movie references. Before Michael Myers is first introduced in this one, we see his shadow on a staircase, just like the iconic scene from the 1922 vampire flick Nosferatu. I think you probably already realize Beth and Tim's costumes are supposed to be Frankenstein's monster and Bride of Frankenstein, but I'm mentioning it here just in case. Later on, when Tommy takes Kara upstairs to his boarding room, you'll notice Mrs. Blankenship watching Phantom of the Opera, a movie with a very famous unmasking scene, perhaps a clue about Dr. Loomis's unmasking of Dr. Wynn at the end of this cut.
Kids, my dear Deborah, what's ruining this country? Everywhere you go, it's the same damn thing. There's no goddamn respect.
He's talking about millennials. There are just a couple of other miscellaneous items that I want to point out. When Barry is broadcasting his radio show the day before Halloween, Jamie calls in and claims that Michael is back, and he responds by saying that it seems like every loony in the state is calling tonight. What's the deal here? Did radio shows not screen their callers in the 90s? In any event, I do love the use of 90s slang to foreshadow the arrival of Michael Myers.
Tonight's gonna be killer.
Finally, there's this shot that I found kind of cool. When Carrie gets back home to the Myers house, you see the coat rack way in the background, which is weird because why would you put a coat rack upstairs? But it's dressed to almost resemble the appearance of Dr. Wynn with the trench coat and the long brim hat. It seems this was maybe supposed to be a bit of a psychological trick on the audience. Like The Shining parallels, another example of this Halloween having a little bit more of an affinity for psychological horror than the others. Whether you prefer the producer's cut, where Loomis discovers that Michael's escaped and sees the thorn symbol appear on his own arm, or the theatrical cut where Michael turns on the Colt and then gets drugged and beat up by Tommy and Kara, this is where we reach the end of the line on the Halloween Express. For connections to the 20-year timeline, including destinations like Halloween H2O and Halloween Resurrection, go back to Halloween 2. In the meantime, make sure you thank Jimmy Champagne for joining us on this entire journey and sharing his expertise on all things Halloween.
Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe to Zach's channel. I know that he won't say it himself, but there is a ton of work that goes into each and every one of these videos, and he totally deserves your support.
Make sure you subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell for all notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.